Very good. Okay. Let's see if others arrive. Let's pause this for a while. Good. Let us resume the learning. And let's do quickly today's Torah portion. Shalom. Oh, no. Here. Oh. So here's today's Torah portion. We're talking about the flood. Let's just do Rashi and then we'll skip over, see if other people come. We'll skip over to the rainbow. All right, here. There we go. Good. There we go. Let's just do today's chita. It's good. We'll do it quickly. Vayomer Hashem leNoach. God said to Noach, Bo atava kol beischa lateva. You and all of your household go into the ark. Ki otcha re'iti, because you, I saw tzaddik lefanai b'dor, you have appeared to me as a tzaddik in this generation. The low manner, it doesn't say tzaddik tamim. How did it start off? How did the portion of the week start off? It said, Eila told us Noach, tzaddik tamim b'dorotov. That's what it says. That's how it starts off, right? It says that Noach was a pure tzaddik in his generation. Noach ish tzaddik tamim. He was a pure tzaddik. And here it only says that he was, Hashem speaking directly to Noach. He said, you, here we go. Very good. He said, you and your whole household come into the teva because you I have seen to be a tzaddik. It doesn't say tamim. Why does it say tamim? So he said, from here we learn, Lom and them are tzaddik tamim. It doesn't say that you were a pure tzaddik like it did in the beginning. From here we learn, Shomin Miktzatz, you only say a little bit of a person's praise in front of him. And you say all the praise not in front of him. So in other words, when Noach was there, God didn't want to praise him totally. So he says to Noach, from all the animals that are pure, take seven, male and female. From the animals that are not pure, take two. So what does he tell him to take? It says, what do you mean pure animals and not pure animals? The Torah had not been given yet. There was no such thing as a pure animal and not pure animal. So Rashi says, those animals that are going to be pure to the Jewish people, that are permissible to eat for the Jewish people, you could take two at a time. So like you could take two deer, two, of course, cows and sheep. And from here we learn, Lamando, so here we can learn that Noach knew the Torah. He knew what it said in the Torah because God told him to take the pure animals, so he knew. So the Torah was there, in other words, before it was given on Mount Sinai. Kadesh Yakrib, why did he have to take seven? So that he can give sacrifices when he left. to take sacrifices. What do you mean? In other words, he would be able to give sacrifices, and there would still be two left over for to be fruitful and multiply. So who goes into the ark? The birds of the heaven, seven at a time, male and female, to give life on the whole world. Also the birds, pure birds, we're talking pure birds, not like eagles and things like that. And this you can learn, satum, mafurish. You can learn, here it doesn't say which type of birds, but we can learn from what it said previously that only the pure animals, you take seven, and the impure animals, you take them two at a time. Now, when it says 7, it doesn't make any sense. Why 7? I mean, there's going to be one left over, right? So it says what it means is 7 pairs. It says you have to take 7 pairs of animals. The other animals, you only take 1 pair. But here you take 7, and there was 14. 14 animals, the pure ones. Why? Because God says in just a few more days, I'm going to bring water on the world, 40 days and 40 nights. I'm going to wipe out all of the things that I've made in the world, all the living things that I have made in the world. I'm going to wipe them all out. Why 7 days? What do you have to wait for 7 days? It says these are the 7 days of the mourning for Metushelach. You learn, remember Metushelach, he was the father of Hanoch. Metushelach, that God was worried about his honor, so he delayed the punishment of the world for, it says, how many days, how many years did Metushelach live? So you can find out that they ended up in 600 years of Noah. There's a very interesting thing that, how do they know how old the world is? So from the Torah, we can figure out that the world is exactly 5,781 years old. How do we know that? This is if you count the years of Adam, you count the next generation, how old Adam was when the next generation was born, and how old that generation was when the next generation after that was born. So it comes out that you can learn exactly how many years it was until the giving of the Torah. And then after the giving of the Torah, there's the book of Divrei Yomim. You can also learn how many years from the giving of the Torah to the first temple to the second temple. And then we can figure out from there to now. So we know exactly from when the world was created. This, by the way, was one of the points that the Rebbe wants to make, that why the beginning of the creation had to be 7 days, 24 hours, just like it is now. There wasn't any time warp, and there wasn't any, the day is exactly a day. So it says, if you consider the days of Noah, of Metushelach, how long he lived, and you'll find out that he died exactly when Noah was 600 years old. He says, Yamim Od. What does it mean, Od? In other words, there'll be more days after that, Nosef, in addition to the 120 years that everyone was given to live. God said people aren't going to live any more than 120 years. So we got 40 years it's going to rain. 40 days, I'm sorry. Says, behold, 7 more days I'm going to rain on the world, 40 days and 40 nights. I'm going to rip. Why 40? So we learned that already. This corresponds to the days that it takes to make for a child to be formed in his mother's womb. 40 days. What do you mean? Why? Because all the animals, it said that they, according to, like I said before, some people say that this is where the dinosaurs came from. That all the animals they twisted their ways around, so they were having relations with one another, and elephants with with crocodiles and who knows what. So it came out. So it says they troubled God to make all sorts of weird fetuses inside. So therefore, God said 40 days. That's the time it takes to make a fetus. That's the time you get the hint. I'm going to destroy the whole world in 40 days with flood. That's how long the flood is going to come down. The flood lasted for a year. The waters lasted for a year. Noah did accept everything that God told him to do. That is what he did. Noah was 600 years old, and the Mabul was water on the earth. 600 years old. So this is never too late. Noah and his children and his wife and the wives of his children and his sons, they all came he just had 3 sons. And their son, they went into the ark before the Mea Mabul. And we'll see in the Sikha that we learn, and tomorrow morning, that it's not enough you go into the ark alone and you make yourself holy and protect yourself from the world, but you have to take your family with you. We'll learn about that tomorrow. Noah and his sons, it says his sons, the men alone and the women alone, because it was forbidden to have any marital relationships because the whole entire world was suffering. And when the whole world is suffering, you're not supposed to have children. Before the water, also Noah, it says they came in mipnei mehamabul. They came in before the waters of the Mabul. What happened? Noah took 120 years to make the ark. Building the ark for 120 years. And he said, in that 120 years, you're going to make the ark. And give me a second. Excuse me. Yeah. Excuse me. Just give me 1 minute. That's right. It took him 120 years to make the ark. Pretty long time to make the ark. So he says, why did it take so long to make the ark? So it took him 120 years because he wanted to advertise. People that wanted to come, anyone who wanted to come could come into the ark. So it says, Noah, when did Noah actually go into the ark? It says, Mipnei, right before the waters of the flood. So Rashi says, Af Noach bikatnei amunah. Noah was also a person that had little faith. Mamin be'eno mamin. He believed and he didn't believe that the waters of the flood would come. Therefore, he didn't go into the ark until the water actually pushed him. In other words, nobody in the world believed that there was going to be a flood. And for a pretty good reason. I mean, a person starts building an ark in the middle of, Fifth Avenue or someplace, I think the guy is crazy. He's out of his mind. So Noah also a little bit sort of thought, listen, God told me to do it, but I don't believe that God is really going to destroy everybody. When the flood waters came, then Noah went in. Noah went into we'll see that also others tried to get in, but Noah. From the animals that were pure, from the animals that weren't pure, from the birds and everything that was on in the world. All of these animals, stuffed them all into the ark. Now, yesterday we learned another thing. We learned that the ark was pretty small, considering you're going to bring in all these animals and all these elephants and rhinoceroses and hippopotamuses and alligators and all these weird animals. The ark was really not that big, right? The ark was really not that big when it really came down to it. It was 300 amos long, which means it was about the size of a football field and a little bit more, 1.5 football field, something like that, right? A football field is 300 feet. Well, the ark was 450 feet. So it was 1.5 football fields. Well, okay, that's pretty big, but not to get all these animals, stuff them all together. So it says one of the reasons why it tells us to measure is because it was a miracle to get all these animals together inside of the ark. I mean, you can imagine what it was with all the chirping and the screeching and the yelling and the roaring. They all came into Noah, into the ark, male and female, just like God commanded them. What do they mean they all came in? They came in me'alehen, on their own. He didn't have to go and gather them up. Automatically they came. The ones that had not defiled their way on the earth. It seems that all the birds and everything, everything had become decadent. 2:2. All of them were made equal in number. And there's some of them came in 7 and 7. They came in 14. But they're just saying that he made them all equal. They all came in. They were all equally came in to the ark. Even those who were 2, they came in on their own. Oh, after 7 days, after these 7 days, as the flood, we said these were the 7 days, right, of the morning of Mishna, as all of a sudden the water came, it started raining. Not only raining, it says in the 600th year of Noah, and the second month. What's the second month? We'll see there's 2 different opinions, but let's say Cheshvan. This month, here we are. On the 17th day of the month, on this day, opened up all of the well springs from the earth, Tahom Rabbah, from the depths of the earth, and the heavens also opened up. Says, why from the heavens and the earth? I thought it was just supposed to be rain. Rabbi Eliezer says this was Mar Cheshvan, and Rabbi Yeshua says this is Ir. The second month, once is the second month from Tishrei, and once is the second month from Nisan. They opened up to brought the water. Why did this come in? This water from the depths, from the depths. Mida keneged mida. Hem chatu baraba ra ha'adam. They sinned from the bottom. People sinned, and they also got from the Tom Rabbah. As they went down to the depths of humanity, and so Hashem brought up from the depths also the same thing to punish them. The water was on the ground 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days and 40 nights. It says the first day was not counted because the night was not with it. Like it says, Bayom Hazeh. So in other words, the water started in the daytime. In Judaism, the date begins from the night. That's when the day starts. So it comes out the 40th day. According to this, the 40th day was on the 28th day of Kislev. Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, and the months were counted according to their order, whatever it is, according to the order. One is full and one is empty. It comes out 1 year from Mar Cheshvan, 1 year from Mar Cheshvan, or the other way around if you want to say it started off from, Yud base from Mar Cheshvan, and it comes out to be the 28th day of Kislev. You can count out the months in it. All right. The water was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. All right, I would like to see, we have 5 more minutes. I would like to skip to the cloud, to the rainbow. Okay, and after the rainbow, okay, just one second, just 1 second. Be'etzem hayom hazeh, this is what I wanted to stop at. At that very day, Noach and Shem and Ham and Yafes, that's with his 3 sons, and the sons of Noach, and the wife of Noach, and their wives, they came into the teva. Why does it say Be'etzem hayom hazeh? This comes to teach us that the people of the generation were saying, we're not going into the ark. But if we see them trying to go into the ark, show them we're going to break the whole thing and we'll kill them. God said, Ani machniso le'enei kulam. I'm going to, in the etzem hayom hazeh, in the very essence of the day. It says other things about this, etzem hayom hazeh. The Jews went out of Egypt. It says betzem hayom hazeh. It says Moshe, betzem hayom hazeh, went up to Mount Sinai, to Har Navo, in order to die. Be'etzem hayom hazeh, it says, in other words, high noon, God started the flood. When it was full day, and he said to everyone in the generation, you want to try to stop him? Nirim davar miyakum. Let's see, we're up to now, the world, you've been the bosses. You did whatever you wanted, right? Now let's see if you're going to be the bosses. And it ended up they were not able to stop Noach, as we well know. I would just like to go and do a little bit, because that's really what I planned to do, about the Keshet and the Anan, the rainbow. So maybe I'll just say it in a short way. The Ramban explains that some people say that the rainbow. Yeah, let me find this. This is very interesting. It wasn't that there was no rainbow before that. There was a rainbow. A rainbow is a natural thing. But before that, it wasn't a sign. Before that, it wasn't a sign. Here, let's see. Let's go back here a little bit. Well, I don't know where that came from. All right. Here it is. I don't know what's happening here. All right, my friends, for some reason, this is acting up on me, and it's gone out of my control. Oh, here we go. No, this is something else, I think. Okay. All right. This is the sign that I'm going to put between me and between you and for all the generations. What is the sign going to be? Here we go. At Kashti, I'm going to put my rainbow, Natati, I have put in the cloud. Now the Ramban wants to say that we see from this Natati that God already put it there. It was already there from the beginning of the world. But it wasn't a sign of peace. And now he said this, I'm going to make from now on, the rainbow is going to be the sign of peace. Why? Because when two enemies are facing each other, so the rainbow, the outer part of the bow, the place where the string is not, that's facing one the other, enemies. But when they're friends, so they turn their bows the other way. And so also the Ramban says that we see that friends, when they meet each other, their arms are open, also a sign of peace. And it's like the shape of a rainbow. And that's the sign of peace that God made. And then there's another explanation. It's the Malbin, I think. We'll look and see tomorrow. That when everyone was sinning, so there was a counterpart that the clouds of heaven became thick, so even the sun couldn't shine through. And that God said, from now on, I'm going to make it that the world, no matter what people do, the world is going to be permeable, that the sun will come through it. And that's the sign of the rainbow. Very interesting. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Let's now go and learn some halacha. All right, now we're learning the laws of Bishul. We learned yesterday, is there Bishul Acher Bishul? We learned that the main opinion is that there is. I'm sorry, is there Bishul Acher Bishul? Most opinions say that there is not. If a thing is boiled, then you cannot be guilty on Shabbat if you boil it again. Everything is boiled, you're not guilty on Shabbat if you boil it again. But that's only if the thing is totally dry. Everything is wet and the liquid inside of it cooled off, and you heat it up on Shabbat, especially if you put it into it's called a Kli Rishon, a vessel that had been directly on the fire. You can never put anything in a vessel that's on the fire. On Shabbat, you can never put anything on the fire. The only time you can return things to the fire, only if there were special conditions, you were holding on to it and you had it in your mind, you're going to put it back. You didn't put it down. Can't put anything on the fire. But if you took a vessel off the fire, and that vessel is called a Kli Rishon, and you can put in that vessel, even if it's boiling hot, you can put something that's already been boiled and it's totally cold, but if it's dry. Or the Alter Rebbe adds, even if it's warm enough that you can eat it. If it's warm enough that you can eat it, even if it's wet, then you can put it into a Kli Rishon that's not on the fire. But essentially, there is no Bishul Achari Bishul. In other words, if a thing has already been boiled, then you can't be guilty if you boil it again on Shabbat. Can't be guilty. And it says that, but this is only talking about if the thing is dry. Good, but that's the main law. A thing that's boiled, you can't be guilty of boiling it again on Shabbat. Okay, but what if a thing, a food, has been baked, and then you want to boil it on Shabbat? You want to put it into this Kli Rishon that's not on the fire. Can you do it? Don't. Some people say that even though there is no bishul after bishul, a thing that's dry, nevertheless there is bishul after afia, or tzliya. If a thing was only baked or it was roasted, then a thing that was baked or roasted, if you put it, even if the thing is still boiling hot, you have a boiling hot piece of bread or a boiling hot steak that you roasted over the fire, and you put that into a Kli Rishon, even if it's not on the fire. Someone's waiting. One second. If you put that into a Kli Rishon, of course, even if it's not on the fire, nevertheless, because that food has never been boiled before, it's been cooked, it's been roasted, but it's never been boiled. So if you put that into a Kli Rishon, she'adz lettuce bay, that it's so hot. We learned yesterday that's according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, it's either 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Some people say, as he says, it could be 160 degrees Fahrenheit. But anyway, it's something, it's a dish, a cholent, whatever, that's so hot that your hand can't touch it, and it's in a Kli Rishon, so you're chayiv, it's guilty. So in other words, you have a piece of bread that's totally cooked, and you take a pot off the fire and put it on your table on Shabbat to serve everyone, and someone wants to put croutons into it, right? Little pieces of bread that have been roasted. He wants to throw it into the Kli Rishon. That person just did a sin which is punishable by death. That wrecks your Shabbos, huh? Of course, you can only be a death. First of all, there's no punishment of death. Even, 200 years before the second temple was destroyed, there was already no death penalty. And even when there was a death penalty, it was almost impossible to apply it. You had to have the proper warning, and the person had to do the sin immediately after the warning, and it said in all these details. But nevertheless, it's a sin. So shortly, Lefiza, according to this, even the Klisheni, some people say you have to be careful from Divrei Sofrim. We're going to learn, some people even say from the Torah. Commotion is like we said before. Therefore, it's necessary to be very, very careful. Do not put bread that has been baked even into a plate that's a Klisheni. If the soup or whatever, the cholent that's in there is Yad Soletispo. If the food in the Klisheni, so in other words, you take this pot of cholent off of the fire and you put the pot of cholent on your table and you take from this cholent and put it into your plate. Now it's a Klisheni. If you put bread on top of it and that cholent is Yad Soletispe, it's 110 degrees Fahrenheit, you did a sin from the Torah. There's also two other elements over here, and we're going to learn. Some people say that a thick thing like cholent never can be a klisheni. It's called a davar gush. Some people say that a thing that's, what's the idea of a klisheni, kli rishon? A kli rishon is that the walls of the vessel are hot, because a kli rishon is a vessel that had been on the fire. The walls are hot, and therefore it keeps the food hotter. A klisheni is a vessel that had never been on the fire before. You took it from the vessel that it was cooked in and put it into another vessel. So there, the walls suck the heat out. So it makes the food less able to boil or to cook. Well, some people say that only works with soup, that the walls of a klisheni make the food cooler if that food is touching all the time. But if it's a davar gush, if it's a thick thing, even like rice, so it means that each piece there is separate on itself. It has the walls of the vessel are not affecting it. That's what some people say at davar gush. The Rebbe doesn't bring that down here, but nevertheless, it's something to take into account. Anyway, there's something even worse than that. Even if you want to say that it does, there's some people that have a doubt and they choshesh and they worry from a chiyuv chatas, in other words, from a transgression from the Torah, even in a klisheni, shiad soletispo. Some people say that even a klisheni is boils because there are some soft things that are boiled even in a klisheni. And we don't know exactly what they are. And it could be that one of those things is bread. So it could be that by putting a piece of bread into your soup, innocently, you're not throwing it into the big pot that you took off the fire. You have soup in front of you and you take some croutons that had never been boiled before and you put them into your soup and the soup is really hot. It could be it's a sin from the Torah. A mevashel, therefore, a person that cooks, there's some things that are easily cooked, and they cook also in a klisheni, the Yad Soletispe. So because we can worry about this with bread, because bread has never been boiled before, it's only been, so it's like you're boiling it for the first time. And some people say a klisheni will do the job from the Torah. So therefore, you should worry about everything else. So therefore, says the Rebbe, don't anything that might cook in a kli rishon that's forbidden to put in a kli rishon is forbidden to put in a klisheni from the Torah. And if you want to say it's not from the Torah, it's at least from the rabbis. We'll see. Any case, you should be machmer in everything. There's one thing that you can put into a klisheni with no worries, and that is spices. Spices, the rabbis explicitly said you can put spices into a klisheni, and also you can put water into a kli sheni, and also you can put oil into a kli sheni, like we explained. And this is the same of any liquids you can put into a kli sheni. Period. And therefore, afilu b'basar tzalui yesh lahachmir. You're sitting in Shabbos, and you have a nice bowl of really piping hot soup in front of you. And there is also roasted chicken. And you decide you want to take this roasted chicken and you want to put it into your soup in a kli sheni. Well, don't do it. That chicken has only been roasted. It's never been boiled before. Therefore, you'll be guilty because there is bishul achar tzliya. This chicken was only roasted. It had never been boiled. You're boiling it for the first time. Are you only putting it into a kli sheni? Some people say that a kli sheni boils from the Torah. But if a thing had already been boiled, there's no hachmir klal. Therefore, some people say you'll have to look on the box. They say that croutons and also these things are called, what are they called? Soup nuts. That they've been boiled. They're made through boiling them. But I don't know. But if boiling wasn't one of the processes, then you cannot put soup almonds or croutons or mandalech, whatever they're called. You can't put it into a kli sheni. There was the soup bowl that's right in front of you, if it's really hot. But a thing that's already been boiled before, there shouldn't be any reason to be machmer at all. Even in a kli rishon, that's not on the fire, of course. A thing that has already been boiled, if your croutons have already been boiled, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with putting them even into a kli rishon, because they're dry. Because there's no bishul after bishul. That's what some people say, that there is bishul after tzliya and afia. In other words, a thing that has only been baked or roasted, you have to watch out. Don't put it into hot boiling water on Shabbat. Not boiling water, hot, untouchable water. That's one opinion. But there are some people, yesh matirin, some people say that there is no boiling after something that was baked or roasted. And ba'afuya b'tzalui, even if they're totally cold, some people say that you can put them even in a kli rishon, roteach, even in a boiling kli rishon. Some people say, in other words, you have a pot of cholent, you took it off the fire, put it on the pot, that you can take pieces of bread and throw it in. Because there's no bishul even after afia v'tzaliyah. What's the custom? Like the first opinion. The custom is to be careful, like the first opinion. Don't put bread even into a kli sheni all the time that this kli sheni is yad soletis bowl. But b'diavad, if you have some weird guest and he takes bread and throws it into the cholent, boiling hot cholent pot, you just took off the fire and put it on the table, he throws bread, it's okay to eat that bread. B'diavad is not a sin. Yesh lahater afilu kli rishon, like this for rishon, or you can put it even in a kli rishon. This is a little different setup here. I get it. Okay, according to this first opinion, oh, wait, am I not sharing this? I'm sorry. This is not being shared? Hello?
You can hear it.
I'm sorry. Someone should have said something. I'm really sorry. Here we go. 1 minute.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. I can hear you, but I was not sharing this. Okay. Now it's being shared. Good. We did that anyway. Yesterday. Okay. According to the first opinion that there is bishul after afia v'tzaliyah, it was according to the first opinion that if you have a piece of bread, cooked bread, or you have roasted meat, that it's forbidden to put it even into a kli sheni. Yesh gam ken afia v'tzliya achrei bishul. The other way around also. Namely, anything that's already boiled, it's forbidden to put it without liquid next to the fire in a place where it can come hot until the yad soletisbo. Okay, let's take a very simple example. You have a piece of chicken, dried chicken that you boiled. You boiled in a pot, you took the chicken out of the soup. A lot of times if you boil chicken and you take it out of the soup and leave it out for a while, so the boiling melts all the fat goes out, and now the chicken becomes so dry that it's almost impossible to eat it. But it's dry. Because it's dry, therefore, there's no bishul achar bishul. Because the thing is totally dry, so you can take it even totally cold and put it into a kli rishon that's not on the fire. Or let's say you have a piece of chicken that is boiled and it's a little bit warm and it's damp. That, according to the Alter Rebbe, you can also put into a kli rishon that's not on the fire. So you have this dried piece of chicken. You have a dried piece of chicken, right? A piece of chicken dried out, and it's in your refrigerator, totally dry. A totally dried piece of chicken, we said, you can put it into a pot and if it's not on the fire, and boil it. But you can't take that chicken and put it, let's say, on top of another pot, dry. Why? Because that's like baking. That's like baking. If you want to reheat it, you have to reheat it in water. That's what he says. It's forbidden to put it without any liquid near the fire and a place that it can get warmed up until it's yad soletisbo. But according to everybody, everyone agrees that something that's been baked, you can bake it again. So in other words, you can take frozen bread out of your freezer, knock off the ice that's on it so you're not melting the ice, and put it on top of a pot that's directly on the fire. Put it on top of a pot. And it becomes heated up. You can do that because there's no liquid here involved. And all you're doing is like you're baking after baking. Davar afui, a thing that is already baked or roasted, it's permissible to put it near the fire, like we said before, even if it's totally cold. I don't remember what I do. Every time it seems to be a little bit different to get to the next law. Oh, I know. I remember here. That's it. Okay, boiling. A vessel that has in it something that's hot. And it's so hot, the yad is soletisbo. So it's permissible to put it on Shabbat on top of a vessel that is wrapped up in garments. You wrapped it up in garments before Shabbat in order to preserve the heat. And it won't get cold. It says, even if the food that you're putting on top has not been boiled, has not been cooked all that it needs to be. And if you would cook it, if you would put it into a kli rishon, then you would be boiling on Shabbat. Shabbat. Nevertheless, here it's impossible for it to become boiled, or even to add on heat. But all you're doing is you're taking this food, even if it hasn't been cooked, and you're just preserving the heat alone. You're not increasing the heat. You're putting it on top of a pot that's not on the fire. It says even more. You can smear the pot with dough that had been kneaded yesterday. In other words, to preserve the heat. You're not cooking the dough. The dough is not going to cook. You have this pot that has something hot inside of it. You can put this pot on top, let's say, of another pot that has been wrapped up in garments before Shabbat to preserve the heat. And therefore, it keeps it warm. In other words, preserving the heat from something you're allowed to do on Shabbat, but not in any way you want. This is the point the Rebbe wants to get to. You are not allowed to wrap any pot in garments or cloth or a towel, even to preserve the heat. You cannot do that on Shabbat. That's called hatmana, and you're not allowed to matmin on Shabbat at all. You can't take anything and wrap it up to preserve the heat on Shabbat. And before Shabbat, you're not allowed to wrap it up in something that increases the heat. Before Shabbat, you can't take, let's say, what do they call it? A water, a kumkum, in one of these water, not thermoses, a big container of what do they call it? A dude, I can't remember the word in English. You have this big like pot that you put on the fire on Shabbat, and it has a spigot on it. You fill it up with water, and you use water from it the whole Shabbat, right? A lot of times you see in synagogues they have that. In shuls, they have. Let's see, we have a word over here. Someone remembers the word is a boiler. Good. Okay, call it a boiler. Good. A boiler. I remember a boiler used to be a thing they had in the basement that you boil. Okay, but good. A boiler. So you have the boiler that's on the fire, and sometimes in shuls they have this. Sometimes they have in shuls. They have a big, huge boiler that people can come in and they can make tea and coffee for themselves. Very nice on Shabbat. Okay, but before Shabbat, you cannot wrap that boiler totally in cloth or in towels. A lot of times when it's cold, in America, even in Israel, when it's cold, so the cold takes away the heat from the pot. So if you wrap it up good before Shabbat, then it'll preserve the heat. Well, if it's only preserving the heat, that's okay. But if that boiler is on the fire, so it's adding heat, and you're not allowed to wrap anything that adds heat before Shabbat. Before Shabbat, you can only wrap in such a way that it preserves the heat. But it can't be a situation, even if the wrapping doesn't add heat, but the fire from underneath does, you can't wrap it up before Shabbat. And on Shabbat, you can't wrap a thing up at all. Can't wrap it up at all, even to preserve the heat. So that's what he's saying here. Next law. But ein manichim, you cannot put a vessel that has inside of it something that is not hot. It's just a little bit warm. It's not yet Yad Seletas Bay. You cannot put that on top of a pot that is so hot that it'll warm up the upper pot to be Yad Seletas Bay. And this is the same law of a micham, of the boiler. A boiler that's so hot that if you put something on top of it, it could heat it up to be Yad Seletas Bay, so you can't put anything on top of it. Anything? We just finished saying the other law. You can. If a thing that was already boiled and it was cold, you can put it on top of it. It was dry. And if the thing was a little bit warm, you also can put it on top of this boiler. When is it that he says you cannot put any food on top of this boiler? Kisha Elyon, if the top food that you're putting is not yet boiled, called tzorcho. Okay, not boiled called tzorcho. We'll get to this in a little while, but the details. Generally speaking, there are four levels. There's 5 levels of a thing being cooked. Maybe you can even make more. Okay, there's first of all food that's totally raw. That we're not dealing with here. Those laws are the food that's totally raw. That only makes a difference in the laws before Shabbat, what you're allowed to do before Shabbat. Then there's food which is cooked ma'achal ben drusai, the food of ben drusai. We talked about that before. Some people say it's 1/3 cooked. Some people want to say one half cooked. That's also really not relevant for on Shabbat. It's also mostly relevant from before Shabbat. Then there's food which is cooked all it needs to be. All it needs to be. But it's what's called mitztamek v'yafelo. It's food that it's cooked all you need. But if it gets cooked a little bit more, you'd be happy. Then there's food which is mitztamek v'ralo. The food is cooked all it needs to be, and if it gets cooked anymore, you don't like it. You don't want it to get cooked anymore. So just to let you know that there's these different levels of food, of finished. So it says, if you have food that has not been cooked, all it needs to be, even if it's ma'achal ben drusai, that you could eat it in a how do you say, in a pinch. Sheyesh bo mishum bishul, food though that has not been cooked, all it needs to be, if you cook that on Shabbat, that's a sin. Even if the food is already warm, which we said that if food is already cooked totally and it's warm, then you can warm it up more, we said, according to the Alter Rebbe. But if food that has already been cooked, all it needs to be, but it got totally, here's the law of the Alter Rebbe, but it cooled off a little bit, even though that it's not so hot that the Yad Soletis bow. But, says the Alter Rebbe, this is the Chiddush of the Alter Rebbe, but because the food is warm a little bit, it's not totally cold, it's warm enough that you could eat it because of chamimusa, because it's warm. It's not that you would eat it even if it was cold. The food is warm enough that you could eat it. If you would go to a restaurant and you would get food like this, you would eat it. You wouldn't say, hey, this is my steak is cold. If the food is warm, but it's not so hot that it's yad soletis. Yad soletis means that it's so hot that it's hard to touch. So if you have food that is warm, even if it's wet, but if it's totally cooked, shenoagim lahakel, our custom is to be lenient, she'ein bo mishum bishul, that it's considered to be cooked sufficiently, that even if you cook it up, warm it up more, you're not guilty for cooking. And it's permissible to put it on top of another pot or on top of a mecham to heat it up a lot. In fact, actually, you could even put it into a kli rishon that's not on the fire. But here we're talking about a pot that's on the fire. You can put it on top of a pot that's on the fire. And if it's a thing that's totally dry and it's boiled all you need to, even if it's totally cold, then you can even heat it up, even if it becomes yad soletis bo. If there's no liquid, so you're not doing any sin. So in other words, if you have a pot, you can never put anything on the fire on Shabbat. You can return things to the fire. But there's sometimes that you can put things on top of a pot that's on the fire. And even though that means that the thing that you put on top of it will get warmed up and it'll get heated. It says if the thing that you want to put, the food you want to put on the top is not yet boiled, then you can't do it. Can't do it. Can't put it on top of the boiler. Your food is not yet boiled yet. You're boiling it. Can't do that. Said, but if the food is, yes, totally boiled, and the food is warm enough that you could eat it, it's permissible to put it on top of that boiler, even though your food becomes boiling. And if the food is not wet at all and it's totally cooked, totally boiled, even if it's totally cold, you can put it on top of that boiler and it'll become hot. And that's what I told you before, that if you have bread and you want to warm it up on Shabbat, then you have to knock off all the frost that's on it. You can take it out of your freezer, knock off all the frost, and you can put it on top of the boiler. That bread, it has to be totally dry. That bread, it's like baking. As we'll talk about, God willing, more the laws tomorrow. Right. I want to just say one thing here. Look, this point the Rebbe makes over here. If it's a thing that's totally dry and it's totally boiled already and it's cold, let's take the example I had of the piece of chicken. The piece of chicken that's totally dry, right? And it's cold. Take it out of the refrigerator. But it's totally cooked. So because it's dry, you don't have to worry about cooking it again. But you cannot put a piece of chicken like that on top. This is how I learned. You can't put it on top of the boiler dry. You'll have to somehow or other make it damp or something like that in order to do. I don't know exactly how you would be able to do it. If it was totally dried, I'll have to ask somebody. I never thought of this. Okay. All right. I have to ask somebody about that. Good. We are now going to learn Mishnah. Oh, I got to get the book. Okay. 4-minute break. 4-minute break, and we're going to go back to learn Mishnah. Okay. Good. All right, we're going back. Just one moment. I'm just trying to get into here. The Mishnayot. Kahati is not, for some reason you can download it. I can download it on my cellular phone, but I can't download it from my on the computer. So
Yeah,
there,
I have it. I have Kahati.
so do I. 1 second, I'm putting it on. No, but then I won't have control over it. 1 second. Very good. Very good. Oh, okay, I'm coming in. Here we go. Zeroing in. Share screen. Start now. Kahati. Okay, Zikin. Makot. Oh, all right, my friends, here we go. Now, Makot starts off, Makot means getting lashes, right? Starts off with the laws of Eidim Zomamim. Because often in Eidim Zomamim, Makot is applied. Somebody has their, someone has their, Arlo Schmidt. Someone, good. All right. So here we go. Let's say that witnesses come, false witnesses. Now we learned that how do witnesses become Eidim Zomamim? What does Eidim Zomamim mean? Eidim Zomamim means that two witnesses testify to incriminate somebody, and two other witnesses come, and they testify that the first two witnesses were with them in another place. In other words, two witnesses come in and they say that they saw Shmerel kill Beryl. And then another set of witnesses come in and say, you couldn't have seen that. That occurred on the first day of Cheshvan. You were with us the first day of Cheshvan in Miami. Didn't even see that. Strangely enough, according to the Torah, we believe the second group and we don't believe the first ones. The first group would say, why should we believe you? Right? It's just your word against ours. So that doesn't work that way. The last group to come in is the group that we believe. Huh? And then what do? They take the first two witnesses that have been proven false, and they receive the punishment that they wanted to impose on the man they accused. All right, let's take another case. They didn't say we saw Shmerel kill Beryl. They came in and they said, Me'idim anu, we are testifying, Be'ish Poloni on Shmerel, Shu Chayav Malchus Arbaim, that he did a sin that requires to be beaten 40 times. That means 39. Then Nimsu Uzomami. And we find these two witnesses to be witness 1 and 2. We find witness 1 and 2 to be Zomim. There come in witnesses 3 and 4. And 3 and 4 incriminate witnesses 1 and 2. How they say you couldn't have testified on that. You were with us in a different place at that time. What do? Lokina Shmonim. Each one of the first two witnesses gets beaten 80 times. 80 times. Why 80? I mean, all they wanted to do was impose lashes of 40 on this person. Right? They wanted to impose on Shmerel 40 lashes. Why should they get 80? So it says, I'll tell you why. Mishum lo ta'aneh b'reyacha et shaker. Because they get the punishment that they wanted to apply to this first person, right? but they also did their own sin. They made false testimony against someone else. That punishment itself is punishable by lashes. Omishum. So first of all, they get punished because of their own sin, namely that they came to court and they made a false testimony, and also because of asitem lo kasher zaman, and also because of this strange law of edim zomanim. So therefore, each one of these first two witnesses gets beaten 80 times. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim omrim, but the wise men, the Chachamim, the other wise men, they say, "Ein lokim el araboim." What's this 80? You give them 40. All you give them is 40. That's the maximum you can get. True, you have a very good point, Rabbi Meir. They did their own sin, but I mean, every time you're always going to give them 80. Anytime people give false testimony, so right, they're automatically going to get lashes 40. And also you do to them what is supposed to be done to the other person. But if the punishment they wanted to give to the other person is lashes, you don't give them 80. 40 is the most they can get. That says the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir doesn't agree. We'll see the commentary in a moment. Mishalishim b'mamon ve'en mashalishim b'makos. Says that they divide up money punishments, but they don't divide up lashes. How so? Two witnesses come in and they say that Shmerel owes Beryl 200 zuz. The Nimsu Zonim, and the first two witnesses are found to be liars. Another set of witnesses come and say, Imano you were with us. Mishalashim Beneim. So what do? They divide up between them. Do Shechayav Malchus Arbaim, and there's Zonim, and each one receives 40. So there's money punishments they can divide up. They say he's guilty of $200. He should pay $200. So then, not each one of them has to pay $200. Let's look at the explanation. We give testimony. We're testifying on such a person that he gets beaten 40 times. We saw him do a sin on such a day, a negative commandment that you get malchus on it. Ate basar v'chalov, for instance. They saw him eat milk and meat together. He boiled milk and meat together, or milk and meat was boiled together, and he ate it. Oh, that he joined a shor v'chamor yachdav. He joined a ox and a donkey together. Now, you should know that in order to get lashes, you have to warn. It's the same thing as getting the same criterion are there as getting punishable by death. You have to warn the person. The person has to admit, I know it, that he heard that he has to do the sin immediately after. The witnesses have to see him together. Very difficult to impose lashes also. In any case, these people tried to get Shmerel beaten 40 times, and it didn't work. It happened to be that someone else saw them, two other witnesses saw them in a totally different place, exactly at the time when they say they saw Shmerel. So they, says Rabbi Meir, they get beaten, each one of them gets beaten 80 times. Pamayim malchus arboin. Why? Mishum, because of lo sa'aneh b're'achad shaker, because they gave false testimony, and mishum, because asitim kasher zomim, and because this strange punishment of edim zomim, you do to them what they wanted to have done to this person they were accusing, because they wanted to get him malchus. That's what Rabbi Meir says. What is Rabbi Meir's explanation? Shalhoyel v'ano motzim, since we find that edim zomim, that they get beaten because of Edo Checker in a place where you don't do kasher zomim. What happens? Just a regular two witnesses come in, right? Two witnesses come in, and the witnesses say, give false testimony. They give false testimony. They say, I saw Sam steal $500 from Joe. And we discovered that he was lying. So you came to court, you swore to God, you gave witness testimony, you get beaten 40 times. That's a crime, punishable over 40 times. Therefore, you should get punished for false testimony, just like everybody that gives false testimony in court, makes an oath, get beaten for that. And in addition to that, you also get beaten another 40 because they wanted to falsely impose, unjustly impose 40 lashes on this shmerel. So therefore, each one should get beaten 80. The Chachamim say, no way. Ein lokim elav, you never get beaten more than 40 times. Mishum ka'asher, there are times you do get beaten for, but in any case, in this case, you only get beaten 40 times. Like it's explained in the previous Mishnah, because it says, Kadei Risho, you only beat a person according to his one sin and not, you can mechayev him. You can't make him punishable for two. For two sets of lashes, you can't give him. Sometimes you can wait the person, you try him again. So it says mashlishim b'mamon. Eidim zomamim. If you have these false witnesses that they try to make someone unjustly pay, and they were proved to be zomamim, mishalishim beineim et tashlumim. What does it mean? They divide. Why does it say mishalishim? To teach you that if there were three witnesses, then each one of them pays only 1/3 that they wanted to impose on this person. Moving, so it's understood, shit, if there were two witnesses, so each one pays half. If there were four, each one would pay a quarter. So in other words, 100 witnesses come in and they say that we saw Shmerel borrow $100 from Beryl. Now he doesn't want to pay him back. And then all these 100 witnesses are discovered to be Eidim Zomami. So what happens? Each one doesn't have to pay $100. Each one pays $1. Okay, but on the other hand, what if the Eidim Zomami wanted to apply beating on someone? Eidim Zomami shenechayev malchus. If the witnesses, like we had in the previous case, they tried to falsely make somebody guilty and receive malchus, so we don't say that each one just receives, let's say, one makkah. There's 40 witnesses, each one receives one, according to the number of witnesses. No, each person gets beaten 40. Because malchus, we don't do kasher zomem unless one of the witnesses gets beaten malchus shlemo, like he wanted to do to the person that they accused. She'en siruf b'malchus. Each one of these was a partner in this crime, so that each one of them gets beaten 40 times. That's as far as corporal punishment, but as far as money punishment, financial, since the witnesses all joined together, so therefore they just have to pay what they wanted him to lose. Right? They pay him back what they wanted him to lose. So therefore, they wanted him to lose $100, so now they make him gain $100. That's okay. But if they wanted him to get beaten 40 times, so if each one gets beaten one time, then they don't, right? Then he doesn't receive anything from that. What does he receive from? So therefore, they have to each one beaten. How so? If they testify to someone that someone owed someone else 200 zuz, and they are discovered to be zomamim, if they find 200 zuz and they found to be zomamim, then they divide it between them. If there were two witnesses, so each one pays 100. If there were three, each one pays was 66 and 2/3, etc. Just like we explained before. But uh, the accused has to receive altogether the $200 that they wanted him to lose. But if they said that he's guilty at 40 lashes, then each one receives the 40 lashes, just like we explained before. Makos. Mishna Daled. This is something we already talked about. The witnesses do not become Edim Zomrim until Sheyuzma Tatzlam. They have to be found to be guilty. For instance, we saw Shmerel kill someone. How can you testify you saw Shmerel kill somebody? And when exactly was this? On the first day of Cheshvan. Well, the first day of Cheshvan, Hari Nerag Zeh or Hahorig, Shmerel, he was with us on that day. Or Shmerel was with us that day. Or you want to say, who did he kill? He killed Yitzchak Rabin. Yitzchak Rabin was with us that day. He didn't even get killed that day. This is not Edim Zoman. This is what's called Hachasha. The witnesses have been challenged. When do we say Edim Zomamim? If we say, Hey Chatem Edim, how can you testify that Shmerel killed Yitzchak Rabin on that day? Atem, you were with us. You witnesses, you were with us on that day in a different place. That's Edim Zomamim, and these witnesses get killed because of their attempt. Okay, we learned this introduction, which is very interesting. The point of the introduction is that this law of Edim Zomrim, it's a law from the Torah that really doesn't make that much sense. Because like I said, why should you believe the second set of witnesses? Believe the first set of witnesses. Right? Two set of witnesses come in, and let's say they really did see Shmerel kill Yitzchak. They really did see him. They saw Shmerel kill Yitzchak. And these two witnesses, right, they saw Shmerel. But Shmerel has a brother, he's very rich, and he hires two other witnesses to come in and say, hey, you were with us on that day. We saw you in a different place. Right? If these two people, they were unfortunate, there was no other witnesses around, they're in really hot water. They testified for the truth, and these false witnesses testify. If two witnesses come and testify to the second set that they were with them, we talked about this before. So it comes out odds and evens, it flips around. So let's say, take an example. Couple number one of witnesses comes in and say, we saw Shmerel kill Yitzchak. Couple number two of witnesses come in and we say the first two witnesses were with us. What happens now? The first two witnesses get killed and Shmerel goes free. Comes in a third group of witnesses and they say, what are you talking about? You, second witnesses, you were with us. Oh, now all of a sudden it flips around. The second witnesses, they're the ones that get killed, and so does Shmerel get killed. Right? Then all of a sudden come another set of witnesses that they testify that the third set are liars. So then what happens is the third and the first witnesses, they get killed, and so goes. So let's go to this. Witnesses are not made Edim Zomrim until they themselves, the witnesses, are proven to be guilty. The witnesses themselves have to be proven to be liars, not just their testimony. That if we prove their testimony was false, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were liars. We just have contradicting opinions. Like it's going to be explained in the Gemara. We learn this from what it says, Eidim Zomim. Where do we get the strange law? Hine Eid Sheker Ha'ed. We say the witness, he was a liar. But we have to prove that the witnesses themselves are liars. It could be that the witnesses really saw something and they made a mistake, right? I thought it was Shmerel that killed Yitzchak. Maybe I made a mistake. It could be. You're not guilty for that. But if you weren't there at all, then it's a sign that you just made the whole thing up. And Ketzad, for instance, here's a case where they don't get killed. Or if they say, we testify that Shmerel killed Yitzchak on such and such a day, and the witnesses say, how can you say that Shmerel killed Yitzchak on that day? Hari Neragu, the one that was killed, Yitzchak, the person you said he was dead on that day, or a Horeg, or you say Shmerel killed him. They were with us on that day in a different place. That Yitzchak was not killed on that day, and Shmerel didn't kill him because either one of them, they were with us in a different place. So if so, we see that your testimony is not right. This is not called Eidim Zomim. Why? Because the witnesses themselves were not proven to be liars. Just that their testimony was a lie. The testimony was false. Therefore, they don't get punished. The witnesses don't get punished. The false witnesses don't get punished. You don't do to them what they wanted to do. That's called Edut Mucheshes. This is what's called contradicted evidence, contradicted testimony. And we say that their testimony is negated, but they themselves, the witnesses, they go free. But if they testified they testified to something that happened and came along to witnesses and said to them, the last set of witnesses, right, another set of witnesses came and they said, how can you testify that Shmerel killed Yitzchak on this day? It could be that Yitzchak was killed on that day. And it could be that even Shmerel was there. And that people heard Shmerel say, I'm going to get him, I'm going to kill him. But these two witnesses that they testify, right, the first set of witnesses, a second set of witnesses comes along and says, you didn't see that. You were with us on that day in a different place. In a place where you couldn't have possibly seen this. That's called Eidim Zomim. And they're made Eidim Zomim because they themselves are proven to be liars, not just their testimony. In a case like this, is imposed upon these witnesses what they wanted to impose upon the accused, the man they were accusing. As we'll learn tomorrow. Be with us tomorrow with God's help. Thank you for coming. 8:15, we're learning a beautiful mimer from the Rebbe from Tafshin Lamed Chet about Noach and the purpose of difficulties in the world. God bless you all, and have a good Chodesh Tov. Have a good month, and we'll, God willing, see each other tomorrow.
Chodesh Tov. Thanks, Rolf.